I'm soaring, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. Literally sprat wow ended on the Ukrainian and American delegation in Florida. The Sovereign Secretary of the United States, Marco Rubio, came out before the journalists of the Aisle Hall. This chair was also productive, but you overestimate the richness of work to reach the bag result. Rubio is again under the chair. Americans still love to live in Ukraine, and yet there would not be a repeat of greedy guilt. A greedy attack on our Ukraine. The words about the fact that the results were not reached, allegedly, of course, the way of life with a bureaucratic move mean. Even before that moment, the American and Ukrainian delegations have not been able to achieve concrete results so far with the drive of those tortures. I persuaded 2 rounds, and here I need to say more. There was a Zustrik in an expanded warehouse, there was a Zustrik in a closed warehouse, 3x3 view of Rubio, Wichow and Kushner from the mayor, Natav and Skibitsky sign of the head intelligence directorate of Ukraine. And the axis is obvious that closed Zustrik could stats on Bilsh folding niche Zustrichi. About expanded warehouse I'm closing from Oyster represent Kiev and Washington. Now the concluded word is in front of the journalist and the state secretary, with the received in the state. So that Russia Maya is so integrated into the jealous regulation in Ukraine. And the most special representative of the president for the tag with the received states, Steve Wichow, will go to the Russian capital tomorrow. Absolutely did not understand. I will dilute the turns in those situations with the president of Russia and Putin. Then the Americans themselves have not managed to have a residual understanding with the Ukrainians so far. And Putin is in that place, continuing on the polygates on his maximalist minds of completed guilt, and on the readiness of I, Queen, myself glorified at the tables of Kyrgyzstan in Bishkek, to continue such a war. Until the rest of the Ukrainians. I do not know, I am not looking for a withoa to Moscow crabbing on the church peacemakers of the American President Donald Trump. It was so logical that he would still go into understanding with Putin. Shvid all sides of the husband will not be turned until the already carved and Navrikny saints in the West. 2020, and we can talk with you about the fact that the process and the serious adoration of the American administration will continue this process, and looking like it can reach a concrete realistic result. Allegedly, he notified and Zahid media with head torture. The participants of the American-Ukrainian delegation discussed. There was torture even before the so-called exchange of territory, and so the torture is tied up firm. The guarantee of the yaks can be in Ukraine with the states received, and the yak can be infected for Ukraine for non-repetition of the cruel and piddly Russian aggression in the Rada. I still have you have a lot of combat days on the Russian-Ukrainian front, and you have a lot of Russia of Ukraine. And then it sounds like you are a test, and also an exchange of territories from the terminological point of zones. And prot, that all the fault, well, you can turn it off for a short period. About Ukrainian troops were on a pillowcase, often on the territory of the Kursk region of the Russian Federation. After all, you visit the territory of Ukraine. And I am still someone who will change territories. This is from the point of view of international law. From the point of view of your knowledge of the status of these territories, about the exchange of one Ukrainian territory for an inch. Punishing mines. Russian troops overestimate these territories, yaks and controls in those regions of Ukraine. Not for the Russian Federation, I specifically seem. There, at the time of the referendum of the independent power, the Kharkiv region with a one-part recognition of the independent power to the Russian Federation. I also guess so, it used to happen, knitting processes from the occupation of Donetsk and Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia regions. Crimea from the cob of the occupation of Russian and temples and territories were shaken by the independent powers. And the referendum was forgotten by the buckets. That before their arrival it was not up to the days of the most prominent imperial entourage with a private retinue. Here. And for the Ukrainian troops, these territories will not be covered, the yaks are still under the control of the Ukrainian army today. They are frequent on the territory of the Donetsk region, and here on the territory of the Ukrainian regions of the Russian Federation, and the Kherson region of Ukraine. According to the hiring firm, the Russian side is not like that, alas, even before the Paris and Kherson regions. Russian President Putin is now in his press conference in Bishkek, absolutely categorically. The invasion of Ukrainian territories will continue until the moment when the Ukrainian troops do not hear the controlled areas. Up to and the Russian Federation, these areas in us and up to the political houses. And the Russian Federation, I will fight for those areas until Kola Day, it can become control over it. And obviously the same frequent mishaps with the received states of Ukraine. And here it is important to reason. And it is known that the President of Russia needs the Donetsk region itself, and the Kherson region for Paris is not needed. Like logic in the shop extortion Putin. But there are two important models here. I am the President of the Russian Federation, and you are helping us to destabilize the depletion of weapons and power. The model is tied to the fact that the Russians, that Putin in the icons of his amusement Kevin, gave the so-called Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics for a fierce 2020-something. About the decision about the independence of the pseudo-republics profitable in the Kremlin. And the cob of guilt for their so-called territorial integrity of the cordon of the Donetsk and Lugansk regions of Ukraine. And the fact that the Russian troops, and we will continue to be out of control. Extremely drat, and Putin, and his helpless in the eyes of the imperious chauvinistic Nala, and numb continuation of the war for the whole. And there is another point on richly important, and not tied to the Russians. And I, Putin, am extremely ignoring and Russian, with a participant in the political process in the Russian Federation. As we are with you, and everything perfectly informed him about the destabilization of the situation in Ukraine itself, as well as the destabilization of the situation in Ukraine. So help the Russian troops to cover the entire territory of a neighboring power without problems, and drive away the frequent arrivals of the territory of a neighboring power to Russia in the yak of subjects in the Russian Federation. Putin knows perfectly well that Ukrainians are often attacked today. The guilt is ready to be accepted. The tilka is still about rocket attacks, and they are not Ukraine. And on angrily capitulatively wrapped up guilt, the person who is calling on the whole sociological statements demonstrates from Ukrainians is accepted without enthusiasm. There will not be frequent interpretations of such results, I will need to entrust them with them. And maybe not, and I will be the counselors of such a decision of the Ukrainian state from the Rada. And I will be the counselors of the Shvidka Shukadi Vlad Is capitulating minds. And with such a rank Putin would like the fantasy authorities, we can clearly not sociologists. And the mind for the Gromadian guilt in Ukraine, for the fate of those military services of the Ukrainian army. Some of them will be councillors who still demand to go out of position. They will still be in this and the order of the Commander-in-Chief of the dropped forces of Ukraine. And there will be councillors who still demand to inflate their as much as it seems with their own comrades and will be ready. Our positions in the regions of Ukraine are coming out of the Don. I don't think there will be a conflict. And in Putin, the ground for those conflicts would be with the hands of the President and the staff of Donald Trump. The gates and the ground for such a conflict. Also to show the Americans that Ukrainians adore the darkness of the peoples of Nedit and the state, and in May, under the control of the Russian Federation, they are brought to a healthy glue so as not to give Americans and Russians more mutually beneficial, more economical 100 sums. Repeat. I am in Zagalny, the respected situation is close to implementation. And I would like to tell you that the President of the Russian Federation, having repented of his guilt for Ukraine on the 24th fierce, 2020 other hand, respecting another sprat. You can put a crab on the Ukrainian state. I will still slam the greatest Ukrainian dreams, there will still be treason on Vlad. On Vlad, Russian puppets under the wire of Viktor Yanukovych and Viktor Medvedchuk and Vlad. With the holding of low referendums in the Beersnide regions of Ukraine, with the worst eating in those regions for the Russian Federation. The central western regions were heard, the wire was being created on a puppet. The power of curators firm the federal service. These are the foreign intelligence services of the Russian Federation. And I am not aware that it has become a serious moment of treason in the whole of European history. I've heard a little bit of a story about Russian hegemonia on the continent for someone in 2020 in another way. What else is respected by Putin for such engagements of the Vagu? A truly domineering Russian, helpless fate at the continuation and foundation of their own Ukrainians. So in the dark, I think it is absolutely obvious that Putin needs not the Donetsk of the Luhansk region, but the destabilization of Ukraine. Even the President of the Russian Federation is absolutely calm after Trump can get a report, which I don't believe today. With the years, it is possible to deduce the conclusions of the Ukrainian in the territory of the Don. Putin can still say absolutely calmly, another TP. The Trebs are leaving Kherson because of the political areas. What are they about? What are they? And I am an obvious moment of Kola. You agree with the fact that you overestimate the territory of, say, one region of Galoshina, Russia, with your own. Why can't you hear the territory of the region? I Russia so much voted with my own, then the pit to the Donetsk region is cut to the approach to the Kherson one for the fact that I would like to tell you that Russia, in principle, is elected for Tilky, does not withdraw from its vistas. Often the Kherson spare areas are under control, and the dropout of Kola about those often control the Ukrainian army today. Live the term is frozen conflict, not you solution. That you are, of course, still in the peace treaty. And scurrying the term of the frozen conflict, then we have an agreement. So that it wasn't written there. The contract about the supply in the fire is filled with new guilt. The fact that I still have such water to talk about freezing, then it means it can also defrost. And with the West over Ukraine, I am respecting the occupiers of my Spokovich lands. And within the framework of such a plea to the occupiers of the Russian Downy lands in the Kherson region, for Paris, Ukraine. And we have Russian politics of Ukraine, with a political map of the retinue. There is no such plea. Maybe just for an hour, while I'll be poking my son for a fatal blow. And so that no one has any illusions, we say, I am him and important. What am I going to do? These are guarantees. And here's where to find the best moment, but it's easier that Russians with Americans and Americans with Ukrainians could not. And Kola about Ukraine's guarantees. It's easier to talk to Putin with wits. Kolya Putin categorically rejects such guarantees and attacks on Ukraine. Well, in the process today, in principle, I will talk. The Ukrainian is offered for the Moroccan process today was. And it is clear that we will be given a stitch for the podium. And I have read all of our minds the statements of the Sovereign Secretary of the United States, Marco Rubio. That's the same statement by Revnyak of the Ukrainian delegation, of the Secretary of the Ministry of National Defense of Ukraine. The mayor. I'm a guessing round in such negotiations. Andrei Ermak was not taken into account in the Ukrainian side. I still met with the Americans. And I was just on my bet to go to the state received for the American side, with the sovereign secretary from the received states. Marco Rubio. Rustam's claim at the mayor's bilch, a short and not specific niche, is Mark Rubio's claim. And that Secretary of various National Defense Kvitnu, who's strong Ukraine. We have discussed all the tortures that are important for Ukraine, and since we received the state of the shafts. But in principle, about the fact that I am serious about the time of the blessed Maya. It is also impossible to say that the parties managed to pass concrete results. And this torture, and it can be easier to add which from Putin. And the soul is a good story on the certificate. Because we are with you, of course. So, what is the logic of blueberry diplomacy? Firm Americans with Ukrainians. I'm points, let's say not turns presented to Putin, are not points of Russian-Ukrainian American houses. And Propanovit them with a tire of praise, I'm still Putin says that those points are not tika to him. Then Vin is such a rank blocking the soap process itself. Not to the President of the Russian Federation. Yak, we have already bought with you, do not create problems for yourself with Donald Trump. Another uprising days the situation with those problems from Bilshin. I'm already talking on a one-time basis of regular esters in the highlighted process, and we'll get together. It is also important for a skin day. That Putin is with the Polar Plan, given a special sign by Russian President Kirill Dmitriev to Steve Five and Jared Kushner. After all, stimulating the president with the pro-Russian NAFTA giants received in the state, as well as sanctions. Rosneft and Lukoil. And although these sanctions were imposed on Chergov for 60-90 days, and such a member of the MITA, in spending the Russian Federation in sanctions. on the stuffing of plans into American copper by the same Dmitri. It is also known that she laid out with Putin and Bachel another Sim-Vince in Bashkit. What happened? That's really what happened, right? Honey Pascha is not a failure. And Putin also needs PPR to ensure that Trump does not benefit from sanctions alone again. I will notify you that Trump is being chiseled on the tilka by Vitaly Kushner, and I, literally speaking, adore his degenerate economy. And the sovereign secret with the received in state in Marco Rubio, and the Secretary of the Treasury received in state Scott Bessent. Moreover, Bessent may have it because it is not ideological motives. I will just be a counselor to them. I'm not going to be an autogus power on the market yet, it's going to be in economical ruins. Then what's the problem for them with the received states? For such an economical ruin, the Russian Federation. Economically ruin of the Russian Federation. The recipe to the mayor and quietly forgot. The Russians will smoke economically, socially fail, and sort things out among themselves, so for everyone who is them, well. Putin is extremely, and here is such an economical socially failure. Can produce the Chekist vertical itself to collapse as a result of the buckets extremely. And we already know about the Radisky Union and its inglorious Shvidka for profit. So, maybe in another option. Putin, in principle, accepting those points, yaki privis we. And the mind with him propanuli and their own. And it means that they really won't come back tomorrow. Brest means what Marco Rubio basically said. It is also necessary to include Russia in the nanny, but it is logical. There's still just an American-Ukrainian other and the mayor on so far. We are not at war with the received states, but firm the Russian Federation. If the president is literally on the mind, and the president was given, then you don't want to be on the leaky paraglider of the president and the tone. Well, briefly seeming. I'm still Putin tomorrow will accept these items brought from Florida with Ov, and I'll get my own. I will also mean the cob of a real process. There will still be yes, you will turn the Second World War. And already with the points of the stream, Putin is still the weather and for propane. And you are a special representative of the received states for Ukraine. Army Minister Den Driscoll will go to Kiev and be squeezed into the President of Ukraine. To grab at those points I'm for propane Putin. I'm still frequent on these items in that look. On the American-Ukrainian delegation weather, and often but not. Vitkov is already with Pogozin, and the new point, and the planned Putin. And with the propane point, Ukrainians to Moscow, and then Putin will embroider, and then I will be added further. In line for new sanctions against the Russian Federation. In those stories of those who perish not you. Who Pershi will look different in the eyes of Trump. The one who has rendered will catch his breath without a head ally. They will also give up their nerves extremely with the receipt of the states to spend adoration on Tilky, so that we give them. At the same time, we do not want to say anything else. I still infect Putin's nerves with Persia than they are in the hall, that he doesn't have much nerves there. Now we still have to go. Then there may be a strong, intense, including economical lawsuit against the President of the Russian Federation. On the side of the Americans. You can use it with the imposition of new sanctions against the Russian Federation. It is clear that it is overgrown, it is not possible to talk, yet we know with you about T. It is easier today for the Ukrainian and American devil, as you know. In the details, but in the niche that they are not cooked. And Rubio is higher up to the journalists in the pit chair. Americans also love that the Ukrainian people should lead her higher to blame. Not just for the kind of buvavshi Ukraine, but those who forgot, and the strongest is the most possible below Shibula Bikola. But we Tesh, what do we want? We want more as a result of those guilt. Ukraine was able to still Hromadyan Bilshi was not afraid of a repeat of the military. Ukrainians can forget their strong and capable Ukraine. For the tag, it is required that it be soapy. Let's read the full text of Ruby's application with you, so that the infection that, in principle, was said now those applications. Our tattoo will complete the guilt, and Bilsha will not just complete the guilt. We don't just adore completing the guilt. We really want to go to Ukraine, as if the invasion of Russia and I are important to Nikola Bilshiknulas. We want them to go into the era of reference prosperity. We want the Ukrainian people to come out of all the guilt, not just so that you can see your Ukraine, but also so that it is Bilsh strong and Bilsh kvitnish, be lower than the Kola Ranish. And that's what we're all going to stand for today. Tiki is about the mind. About the mind, for Ukraine is rich in economic prosperity. I thought that we were bees laying an ambush for what on the wife. Delicately, smoothly. Here the soul is richly stored. And obviously the side is hurt here, because in May the stats are often jealous and will continue on the offensive to Moscow. Although we have so many contacts with the Russian side, and we have a scared understanding of them after looking so much. We impose a lot of work. And today was a productive and self-serving session again. I think we have made some kind of progress. And we will continue to realistically bet before the discounts are collapsible, and also optimistically. The fact that we are making progress. I think there is a split of the fact that the prices are just about the end of the war. What is important is to ensure that the Maybit of Ukraine, as we rise, is even, the lower the Kola. I specially read to you in such detail those words that you are hiring the mind of a sodium sovereign secretary. And I mean to say to you that the Europeans, even before they will attack, and everyone respects him, will also cut out the very situation with the minister of Zakordnik, not a sword, and a panda fult, tell him that you decide. I will be optimistically surprised that at once I have a real chance to prepare on the Rivni mind, and we have decided before you. And the Achelnik of the Ministry of Zakordnik Spravranti, Pan Baro Pit Chair, still dosiag to the mayor in Ukraine and real. Putin is also madly creating the Radiant Empire for the mines, starting with the conquest of Ukraine. And this is absolutely accurate, and Teresa Shade is a reference book for the President of the Russian Federation. Friends, I will still be whose information in the course of our Ratsmova with you. I will share Novikov's sound with you at once. I will ask those who are not subscribed to the channel such a caress and subscribe to it. I tell you on the air that we are with you, and we get everything up to the Millionaires channel. And it ended with Tilky 13,000. Yaki supplement those who have already subscribed to the channel in 1,000,000 and be 13,000. Subscribe to the channel, I will be grateful to you. Put your own podobeki. You know the situation of Svetly in Ukraine, and Richly who he can't. The other does not pass, but you will be able to turn it light. It is known. Comments still you think about the new round of the Russian-Ukrainian and American delegation, and about what will happen with the Russian and American delegation already coming. And the tools. Diakuyu. The torture of ether. In addition, I went to Trump for understanding the Shlyak Taisku to Ukraine Nikola Inot. And my stick a special prize and tomahawks on Putin. Not me as tomahawks Trump to Putin, not on Putin sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil. This is a serious blow to the budget of the Russian Federation. I have since received the United States will be forced to control these sanctions and will really fight with the Russian TV fleet, which is selling its naphtha to the Russians illegally. This creates an economical mind for the Russian regime and invents for its degradation. The torture is that Trump can still be seen as a counselor, will be able to award the most noble Ukrainian deeds. The signifying Russia will be Ukraine, and I will be Postashat from the reset. And the wines are on display like Chika and Russia. Vlad is elected by the capitulates. There wasn't 100 light discounts per hour. Vlad and you can. The idea of the act is marginalized. The wine is not to be drunk. The wine is on the run, in order for the power to be run. The theme is the idea of guilt on high I will survive. The reader is absolutely required to understand. Tom is still high on capitulation. It's just the collapse of a power. We are talking with you, and about the fact that the sword did not capitulate to the ears of the holy guilt on the territory. There was also no ground soldier, at that time it was ruined. And to the German state, and you know more. Frederick the throne of Kaiser Wilhelm, the friend of the monarch in history, was not, and was actually demoralized by the German army. The result is that there are quite a lot of worlds on display in Ukraine. Putin just can still be counseled by people, and in this stick from Ukrainian, and no one saying that Vlad, so that she was injured. She would be ready to surrender to the fact that she still spiraled on. So I'm not respectful of the fault laid out. I just want all the blame to be plentiful, so that it will kill ambushes for the Russian Federation itself to lay. Because, of course, we didn't put the blame on a simple speech ourselves. Ukraine so otherwise, Mayor is envious, and about the continuation, and the Shlyak is simply overgrown. And Russia will also stop selling energon, not like secrets beyond the edges and budget holes. And Richly, who is aware of Russia? I think it's Putin. I'm trying to figure out why Ukraine can't knock the Russians in the head with the Shlyak of Russia. Through the same drone attacks on Russia's places on Moscow. In every place I have military facilities, but we don't give up what we can. And the problem is that the body needs rockets. And we, of course, are still in Moscow. It turns out to be an effective state against windy defense, as rich as it is so far. Including with a beard without a drone. And hardened the state against windy defense in Russia. Of course, for all its, I would say, leakiness, our condition against windy defense turned out to be enviable. Again, I want to repeat, and the Russians will not stop fighting with us, with the Russian gentry. To fight. And Putin will remember and adore to fight and forever. And the truth is that the less I am in the auto-polishing enterprise in Russia, the more the prospect of completing the guilt is declared. There is a chance to form an effective management system in Ukraine at a time. Incredibly guilty, I am not an optimist, but you are intelligent. I am optimistic about respecting the chance to form an effective management system. For an effective management system, it is necessary to believe in a constitutional decision and in a constitutional speech. So in the Ukrainian parliament, taking over the event functions are taken according to the constitution. And I would like to guess that you and I forget that in the topic of the Ukrainian parliament, the folding party is still a servant of the people. And I'm a parliamentarian. The state of Turpin to the president of the candidacy in the PC was the DPR. This is all one political son, and I will be oriented to the president of Ukraine with that socio-political elite. What will I do with the National Democratic Party? They will not appear in the brightness of the ministers. In such a new order, the ministers will still be there, and they do not have the services of the people. Maybe they have the right to bid. I am still a serious political conflict, so that the political system is up to the guilt and the conduct of elections. And what am I going to do with a technocratic version of a number of controlled parliament in Tilky? In the servant of the people party, I will be ready to do with such a number. You often think that the leaders of Russia cannot destroy the imperious constitution and a criminal kind of visibility. This is who attracts the leaders of Russia to the courts, that the leaders of Russia to the court. Extremely no one attracts the leader of Russia to the courts. I will not just destroy the alignment, you can deduce this kind of visibility. On this, someone else is attracted to the court. And there are also grounds in the criminal code of the Russian Federation for such an article, yes. I think it is perfectly possible for him to continue expansion, aggression. That's what it's about. Everyone says that Ukraine streams Russia as a kind of conquest of Europe. On discounts it's true, they are just beautiful words that Europeans are for it. But you and I, as you know, are talking about the fact that Ukraine is streaming and Russia is conquering Europe. I will show you that with the conquests on the was absolutely. I will continue to guide absolutely clearly. Ukraine is not a member of NATO, loaded on the Russian Federation in the classical sense of the word. Ukraine for hands stream Russia, the second Zahidny reset, you and not keel control with the population of Russia. In the European Union, of course, you are much lower at times. And in the city, oh, Ukrainians are ready to fight, but Europeans are not ready to fight. And so, from the point of view of human value, it is higher here, lower than Russians, and even lower than Europeans. And the Ukrainians Nikola did not want to fight in the 2014 hand. The adoration of people to fight is declared, then the dictators attack their Ukraine. Into human instincts. I declare myself to Tilka in order to fight. Buckets reveal that there are very few people who are ready for just guilt. Pros and their fatherland. So the Europeans and the Russians will attack them. The Ukrainians will behave the same way, gaining different instincts in human nature here. They will have absolutely no view of our technical missiles, that the nuclear bloc is an exchange of tactful. And maybe in the future strategic nuclear strikes, and we can identify absolutely real. And they think that Russians are social and idiots in terms of a hybrid wine and a real moment, as you of course. You can beat that in it, so can counter. And so all the technological infidelities have gone to war itself. Drones are anonymous. Maybe there are serious problems for Europe as well. I'll order one more moment. Be Bilshi not Stankov, an infantryman of power elections. In general, let's say, with a post-warning. And lying in wait for the Ukrainian presidential parliamentary elections 2000 of the 19th lesson. There may be political heirs to the division of Ukraine and the success of Russia. It's absolutely obvious to me. These are millions of Ukrainian refugees which could not but be accepted in that part of Europe for propaganda purposes. Especially a friend. The fear that Russia is already here, already in Uzhgorod, already in Lviv. And from the decoction, it is possible to put us on pastes, and no one is going to fuck the Europeans in the collar. We couldn't do it for Ukraine, so we can do it for ourselves. And then you start voting, Zaki the party knows, for the party leaders seem to demand from Russia, according to Putin. Tilka's fault was that there was enough of it in the military monopoly. In Putin, I will bring you guarantees to the mayor. The whole political platform for such a parohidu vlada to the ultra-right and ultra-political forces in Europe has already been visited. In Lisbon of good and glory. In the Daki of Ukraine, politicians have already come to vlada. Go to Ukraine. The collapse of our Ukraine, with such a possibility, the collapse of our Ukraine, may mean the collapse of the European project. There, even before Vlad, Eurosceptics will come to European Ukraine. They are preparing for understanding with Putin. That's not careless yet. Europeans have not forgotten the kayak. I'm taking Europe at times across Ukraine. I will tell them that nothing folding is not high one, and is being suppressed on Europe. 30's Rocky 20th story. That's it. Allegedly, the Americans respect, and will hang, so that Ukraine completes its territory. I am, of course, not my information at the discount. About such exchanges of territories, and the overgrowth of guilt, continue to discuss them in Florida. That's a miracle torture. You prophesy that it is normal to beat Tilky great-grandchildren. Shanks those who are ready. And it would be fair to empty those who are not ready. And give me some cordon ham from the Hromadyanstvo. Cordons of Ukraine ham, for those who do not have Viskova teeth. Ukraine is not Ukraine with a closed and cordon. The topic does not give up absolutely obviously. The guilt is closed, the cordons of Ukraine will be in the opening, and for the temples of the teeth of binding. And don't invent stitches. The mind is not from European Ukraine. At once, all the ovas are cut off. Pisak Gromadyan of Ukraine. And a wife, and children, and a man. They will be declared, but the statuses of European Ukrainians are still Ukrainian refugees, and have arrived. Up to them now the military turn to the house. There are still huge refugee trunks of problems on the tiki for the population. Have I taken, have you tried? And for the political elites, and does not want the ultra-right, the ultra-left of the party, to speculate on these problems like a Tire and Stay and Vlad. Kola, we will discuss sociology with Yakovu on Sprats with allegedly left Ukraine, and it will be too much in Europe. We are not in the fact that God will not be given too much. And I will still have all sorts of problems, then such politicians as Donald Trump will come to the European market. And the Ukrainian Hromadians will simply be squeezed, the rank of the Hromadians of Ukraine without European sports fun. And just send them to Ukraine under escort. And you also think that the ions are bigger and bigger. So Kola starts the idea about what you can honestly empty. You can be empty, and what kind of dreams? People of absolutely incredible Protolku, I am basically inaccessible from the point of view of minds on the huge. And Britain in Europe Brexit. And that there was an illusion that it would be like this for 3 times. I won't do it again. And we can provide a serious operation for those who are here, and those who will be embarrassed to turn around. And those who will be the counselor to turn around. All these categories of people will be ready for Ukraine. Drive to the European Union. About cordons, you will be able to work there with a 15-digit number to work in the U. In Romania and Bulgaria we will have. Calmly go and help Europeans in 4 Sabon to Kharkov. And so Ukraine needs to stay in. No one will blame you for anything else. Vagu is still overgrown with the federal chancellor, not the president of Ukraine in the voice. Yakim Shin, not to allow the arrival of yes and young people in the 18th 22 Rocky. Do you still think you're a horseshoe of a word? This means that the mood in Europe will also be changed for Shvidka. You can't fool around together on the ground like that. We are talking about your specific adoration. We are talking about what millions of Ukrainians are really hooked on the military idea. Well, it's just reality. Rich, who just doesn't want you, it seems to me that it's already about Insha. Here is the conclusion of the Ukrainian community. And who gave you a decent Ukrainian passport? You can live in not smart. Allegedly legalized there, if there is an eternal legal, deport the stack of Ukraine. I have already really come true with people, and lived in not a small Ukrainian hromadyanstvo. Neo-official passport, and Germans said everything. O Fightersign. Not the adoration of living in the real world, I am important to our links. I am now asking them to be turned to the real in appearance, so that in the real light of the topic, it is possible to complete the guilt. So shliakum to serious skin. And I will visit European Ukraine. Well, I will punish. I also respect the right of the grandson of Europeans to live there more beautiful, below their not today's fathers. To the fact that the era of real warding with China is beginning, including economical snakes. Begin the era of poverty in Europe, how rich who will not need there. We still knew all this, and the shot from the starting pistol about the moon ends at the 24th fierce 2020 other rock. You are not interested in your share, do not profit. In a share in Zagolik. You have to mark up. Geitman Skorapad dropped by Berlin. The Czech in such a share overestimated the Ukrainian state and the collapse. And he was chosen carelessly, calmly. And the guilt of the kind of Kuli Naaman did not die in the act of a terrorist for the NFT. Just a drone rocket arrives for you. Instability, such an era. I'm still referring to the Ukrainian passport. You are not the era of both of you before your wife, and in B. I still you will not be the ranks of operas. To the fact that the ranks of operas of food can be and the litter of skin, who is going to survive in the fire, and dates, can be our grandchildren in the light. Dyakuyu. Overestimate the topic of the channel on it. I ask you those who have not signed up to the broadcast 13,000 need that the channel has become the channels of millions. You also have our rights to expand offensive speech. Put it in a podobake. Channel tools. And what I want to tell you. Yes, it also helps the dropped forces of Ukraine. The offensive is overestimated by the head guarantor of our independence of sovereignty in a folding light, conflict and anxiety. And I want to become